we are just at the beginning of probably the most historical shift that I can think of in centuries. For the first time in human history, the entire world is dominated by a single ideology. X is still working, hand in glove with the authorities to censor dissent. We don't call it censorship anymore. Now it's visibility filtering. The first red flag to me was Elon Musk himself. I mean, the man is a key component of the military-industrial complex. He's a military contractor. Keep people focused on Elon Musk and his Captain America suit, so they don't look at X Holdings Corp. This is who bought Twitter. This is who freed the bird. They cannot dissolve the simulation of democracy completely. I don't think totalitarianism wins.
Greetings and welcome to my interview today. My guest is C.J. Hopkins, an American playwright, novelist, and political satirist who is living in Berlin for 20 years now. And your award-winning theater plays have been produced internationally on big stages. You have tens of thousands of passionate readers globally, and you are the author of several books, including the sci-fi novel Zone 23, Trumpocalypse, The War on Populism, The Rise of the New Normal Reich, and your new book coming out, which is Fear and Loathing in the New Normal Reich. As we know, there was a big media story last year. Your criticism of the COVID measures even had personal consequences for you because here in Germany, posting the cover art of your book, The Rise of the New Normal Reich, in 2 posts on X resulted in a court trial, which is still ongoing. Today, however, I would like to talk about the actual content of your work because I think this is much more interesting than this ridiculous trial imposed on you by the new normal German state, as you also used to call it. You are, as you describe yourself, an old-school lefty. You talk about capitalism. Can you explain why do you not talk about technocracy or neo-feudalism so much, or about all these other isms, but you deliberately talk about capitalism? What is capitalism? Why do you talk about capitalism? And at which stage is global capitalism right now?
Great question. First, let me just say thanks for having me over to talk to you.
Sorry, I forgot to add that you had a cold. It's
Still
ongoing.
have a cold. I've had a cold for about a month. It's really nasty. It's getting better, but people will probably hear the remains of it in my system. Anyway, it's a pleasure to talk to you about this stuff, and I'm really glad to talk about this. I think people have heard the details of my case enough for now, and the questions that you have, this subject, I think is more interesting. I'm not a formulaic Marxist who looks at capitalism in terms of traditional Marxist stages and what have you. My view basically has been, the short version of it is, we live in one big global capitalist world. Global capitalism is the dominant, globally hegemonic system that we all live under and that we have lived under for about 35 years now. If you go back in history, you can see the expansion of capitalism and capitalism, striving towards global dominance throughout the 20th century. There were 2 major reactionary pushbacks against that evolution, one of which being the Soviet Union, communism in the Soviet Union, and the other being fascism. And both of those failed. And by 1989, by 1990, the Cold War was over. And when the Cold War was over, that was really the last big ideological adversary to global capitalism, the Soviet Union and the communist ideology. Since then, that's really when we became one big global capitalist world. And part of the message that I've been trying to get across from people, I mean, I'm an entertainer, basically. I try to make people laugh, but yeah, I've got a theoretical side. And part of the message that I've been trying to get across to people is that we are just at the beginning of probably the most historical shift that I can think of in centuries. It's for the first time in human history, the entire world is dominated by a single ideology, and that ideology is global capitalism. That's where we are. What I've been tracking in my work, I think, is the early stages of the evolution of this new globally hegemonic system. I think people on the right and libertarians, freak out when I talk about global capitalism, simply because things are so polarized now, and people read things in terms of, are you for this or against this? And when I critique or analyze the global capitalist system, a lot of people just automatically assume that, that I'm in favor of communism and I'm a Stalinist and that I'm the enemy of capitalism, which I think is kind of funny, because I don't really have a problem with the essence of capitalism. I don't have a problem with private property. I don't have a problem with people working for other people and getting paid to work for other people and buying and selling things. I like to buy things, and I sell a few things. It's not about that. It's about understanding the structure of the world that we live in. Let me try to actually be a little bit clearer about what I mean when I'm talking about global capitalism. What I'm talking about is an ideology, and sometimes I call it a post-ideology, because when you live in a globally hegemonic system like we do, ideology really becomes defunct. Because when your ideology dominates the entire planet, you don't really need an ideology anymore. Your ideology just becomes reality, becomes just the way it is. I used to drive my actors crazy back in New York City in the 1990s. I would go into rehearsal or I would go into a workshop and I would ask them, who is the greatest, American actor? Who's the greatest, or not even American, who's the greatest actor that we have right now? And people would say, Daniel Day-Lewis or Philip Seymour Hoffman, Meryl Streep. And I would say, no, it's Arnold Schwarzenegger. And it's Arnold Schwarzenegger because at that time, Arnold Schwarzenegger was making the most money. And my point was, and the point that I made to the actors was, money is the only measure of quality and value that we have. It's fine for us actors, gathered in a downtown theater in New York City we have all our values and we decide what's good and bad. But the way the world works, the way our world works, there is only one measure of value, and it's money. It's exchange value. What capitalism does as an ideology is it wipes out all other values, traditional values, socialist values, religious values. It wipes those out and clears them away, and it transforms societies into marketplaces. Right. And the only value that is operative in a marketplace is exchange value. That's what capitalism does as an ideology when it is turned loose and it is not controlled by a society that has another set of values. We're in Germany, so I can give a pretty clear example of that. There in Europe, in Germany, there are still a lot of the remnants of social democracy. For example, I'm an artist, and so I'm a member of something called the Künstlersozialkasse. This means that the state pays for half of my healthcare and pension contributions in the same way that a company would, that a private company would if I worked for a private company. It's part of social democracy. This is the society or the state interfering with the market based on values that are not market values. It's the state or the society saying, we have a set of values. We think these things are important. And so we're going to impede the market a little bit in order to have the kind of society that we want. Capitalism, when turned loose or when given power to dominate a society, it does away with all of those values, and it creates a kind of a society that kind of resembles the society in the United States. There are still the remnants of social democracy, if you want to call it that, in the United States, but the United States, the society in the United States is much, much closer to a pure marketplace. And that is the direction that we are all headed in. You can see it. You can look back and see how it happened in the UK over the past decades. The UK is much further along the road towards a US-style pure marketplace society. Continental Europe is further back because there's still a lot of resistance here. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about capitalism and capitalism as an ideology. What I'm talking about is a values decoding machine that basically transforms societies into marketplaces. It's also my understanding, if you go back and look at the War on Terror and you look at the history of what's happened in the Middle East since the end of the Cold War. If you look at that moment, okay, the Cold War is over. The tension between the Soviet Union and the West has changed. That it was always, that tension was held in check because the Soviets were, working with their proxies and the West were working with their proxies in the Middle East. And suddenly it's over. The Soviet Union dissolves, it's gone. And so what does GloboCap, which is my, abbreviation for a global capitalist, what does the system do? Well, naturally, the impediments are gone in the Middle East. And so naturally, the system looks at the Middle East and says, oh my God, we've got people who are trying to structure their societies according to religious values. They're not just, going to church on Sunday and, saying some words. They actually want to structure their societies according to their religious values. And this doesn't work in a global marketplace at all. These places need to be destabilized and restructured and privatized. Basically, that's what's been happening in the Middle East since the end of the Cold War. The War on Terror went on right up until about 2016. And that's when you see the big shift. They switched the War on Terror off. And the same dynamic that I'm talking about now got directed at the populations in the West. So not in the Middle East and outside, but right at our own populations. And it was directed at them because of this reactionary pushback that started. You see it with Brexit. You see it with the populist parties that had started rising up in Europe. And of course, you see it with Donald Trump. Essentially, the populist pushback in the West that we've been seeing for the past few years is essentially no different than Islamic fundamentalism in the Middle East. Both of these are reactionary rebellions against the spread of global capitalism. These are movements or dynamics, forces that are basically saying, no, we don't want our values dissolved. We don't want to live in a pure marketplace. We want to continue to impose our social values on society, and we do not want to let pure market forces determine how we will live. Radically different, the right populists and Islamic fundamentalists, but essentially the same reactionary force pushing back against the evolution of global capitalism. And then 2020 comes along, and it's right at the end of Trump's first term. And suddenly there's an apocalyptic virus, and we have to shut down the entire, Western world and turn societies into police states, and lock everybody in their homes and condition them to, behave like little authoritarians. Why? This to me was a huge step forward in the evolution of the global capitalist system that I'm talking about, which is evolving in a totalitarian direction. Why? Because it doesn't have anything else to do. When you're a huge power system, and suddenly you discover, wow, I dominate the entire planet. I am just globally hegemonous. There is no outside. There are no more outside enemies to fight. So what is left to do? The only thing left to do is what occupying forces do when they take over a country. It's just, in this case, the country is the entire planet. What they do is, it's called clear and hold. Right? And what it means is they survey their territory, and they look for little pockets of resistance, and they neutralize those pockets of resistance. That's the clear part. The hold part is you consolidate your ideology throughout the entire territory. If people want to look this up, it's a military term. If you think about when, for example, when the U.S. invaded Iraq, right? So the war's over, you've won, you hang Saddam, that's all done. What you do, your next mission is to say, okay, where are the resistance groups? Let's wipe those out. And then let's spread the gospel of, freedom and Americanness throughout the land. Essentially, that's all that the system that we live under has left to do. When I describe it as going totalitarian, I don't think of this as an aberration or something strange that's happening. It's perfectly logical. It's the next evolutionary step of this system.
I looked for your first text about COVID-19, and I discovered it in March of 2020, which I think is quite early. And you mocked the upcoming thing as the global toilet paper crisis, which I find a very apt metaphor for the PSYOP flair this had right from the beginning. And what made you critical in the first place? And why did you see through this so early?
In March of 2020, I just started looking at the news. And what I saw was the beginnings of the most formidable propaganda campaign that I had ever experienced in my life. I mean, it just had all of the telltale signs. And that's what got my attention right off the bat. People may have forgotten by now. I actually created I think it was a 257 tweet thread. 99% of it is mainstream media sources. And it's just tracking the message. And it was systematic. It was coordinated. And the message was incredibly clear. They pumped out the lies. They pumped out, the fake pictures of people dropping dead in China. The World Health Organization announced a 3.4% death rate, which is insane. It would have been, hundreds of millions of people.
And already at the Diamond Princess, this was clear right from the beginning that couldn't be true.
Exactly. But the propaganda push was just so massive and so coordinated. That's what got my attention. The message was, your democratic rights that you think you have, that's all over with. We're in a global emergency. So shut up, follow orders, do what you're told, or you will be punished. And if people go back and dig up that thread, you'll see that I'm actually not exaggerating. That message was crystal clear.
Absolutely. And you did not only see through the COVID psyop, but you were also a sharp critic of the Twitter free speech psyop, as you called it, right from the beginning. Why didn't you buy into the hype? And can you outline for my audience the biggest red flags that make it a psyop in your eyes? Who is Elon Musk, and how did the censorship practices refine after Elon Musk bought the platform?
I think the first red flag to me was Elon Musk himself. I mean, the man is a key component of the military-industrial complex. He's a military contractor. He is Globocap. So that was kind of a red flag to me in the beginning. It said, Elon Musk showed up with his sync, free the bird. It just reeked of hypocrisy from day one for me. So I started, watching it closely. And first of all, I'd like to emphasize this for people. People think of Elon Musk. Elon Musk bought Twitter. Elon Musk saved Twitter. Well, Elon Musk and an incredibly long list of huge global capitalist entities that people can look up. There's an article on Forbes. They finally forced X Holdings Corp to reveal its members. And you can look and see this incredibly long list of huge corporations and wealth funds and Saudi royalty and other oligarchs. This is who bought Twitter. This is who freed the bird. It's not Elon Musk in his suit of Roman armor. But I'll use Musk as a shorthand. What Musk did is he bought Twitter, and we have to go back because people need to understand or remember. At that time, Twitter had been exposed. Pretty much everybody understood that the government and other authorities' hands were all over Twitter, and that they were censoring people and deplatforming people. And Twitter had been exposed as completely corrupted by the authorities. And so something needed to change. So, Emperor Elonicus to the rescue. Elon comes in, he buys Twitter, he announces that the bird is free, he starts his PR operation. And what he does is he brings back some of the more prominent people that had been deplatformed, people that I like and respect, like Jay Bhattacharya and what have you, but also mostly, right-wing influencers and, people who, frankly, I think are bigots. And so he brings back all of the people from the right that had been deplatformed by what people think of as the left, and it isn't the left. It's basically, neoliberalism and the global capitalist establishment. So he brings back all of these people and just starts rolling out this incredible public relations campaign about how now X is the free speech platform. What he did is he bought a company and he rebranded. X is still censoring people. X is collaborating with authorities around the world to censor dissent. You mentioned my case. My tweets are still censored. I'm incredibly visibility filtered, and so are many, many other people. X is still working, hand in glove with the authorities to censor dissent. The only difference is it has been rebranded. My point is, it's product rebranding, folks.
And it's also in the guidelines of X that they write clearly that they do visibility filtering. And as Linda Yaccarino, the CEO, who happens to come from the WEF, said, we also fight against content that is lawful but awful. Freedom of speech does not mean freedom of reach. This is the official policy of the X company.
And Aya, as you said, it's stated, it's printed right on the site. It drives me crazy. I get into arguments with people and they go, what are you saying? X is a free speech. I said, it's printed right on the site. I'm making this up. You can go and look at the pages on the safety site, and they say very clearly.
Exactly. And you have another account which is connected to your artist side or your author side, Consent Factory, where you publish also your text besides your blog. And you wrote, on X, they put a fake age-restricted adult content label on all your tweets.
They were covering all of my tweets with little labels that said this tweet might contain adult content, which basically makes it sound like I'm a pornographer. And these labels were put on tweets that were just promoting my book. They're called interstitial labels, and X still uses them today. So this is during, X time. And so I wish I could remember the name of this, of the former safety lady. So I caught her and I embarrassed her, basically. And so X stopped putting the labels on my account. They continued to put them on many other accounts, like Off Guardian, for example. This is part of the future of censorship. We don't call it censorship anymore. Now it's visibility filtering. It's mind-boggling to me that people believe that they're on a free speech platform. I made the point recently, when you're on X, you are literally on a propaganda apparatus of the United States government. This is a platform that is owned and operated by a key member of the military-industrial complex, who is also now a U.S. government official. That's the platform that you're on when you're on X. And it's just mind-boggling to me that people won't get that.
I think one reason for the Musk cult, as you also call it, and the fact that people are so uncritical about everything that's going on X right now is this origin story of X, let's say, which was the Twitter files. You also wrote about this right from the beginning. You said actually it was a very important story, but kind of we do not hear anything about the Twitter files anymore. So what happened to this story?
The Twitter files, what Musk did, this was a part of the original rebranding and whitewashing that he wanted to carry out in the beginning. It's the perfect thing to do. You bought a company that is corrupt and that had been infiltrated by all sorts of, censorious forces. So the logical thing to do if you're going to rebrand and you want to whitewash the company that you just bought is you do a limited hangout. So you expose a lot of that previous corruption, right? So that people can see that, oh, you're for free speech and you're showing all the corruption in the past and everything. You're opening up the books and so everyone can see what's going on. What a lot of people don't understand when I say limited hangout is they think, oh, then he thinks it's fake. Well, it's not fake. The Twitter files was an incredibly important story. I know Matt Taibbi and I respect a lot of the other Twitter files journalists. I don't put them down at all for doing this story. If I had been in their position, I would have done exactly what they did. I would have jumped all over this story. It was a huge, monumental, important story. It was also a limited hangout at the same time. Limited hangouts are real stories. The point of the limited hangout is to give you this real story, which is only a small part of the larger story, so that you will stop asking about the larger part of the story. And this is exactly what the Twitter files did. This huge, important story came out. Everybody got very excited about it. After it had done its work, Musk shut it off.
But how?
He just announced one day it's over. It's done. We're moving on.
But didn't he give access to the journalists anymore at this point?
No, then the access stopped. It was done. It ended. This was back in 2022. I think people can go back and look at my blog or read my book. He just announced, that's it. We've had enough. It's over. We're shutting it off. Yeah, Twitter files is done. And of course it was done because the point of it was to identify government sources of censorship. The narrative that has been spun out of the Twitter files and out of Musk's rebranding, the narrative is the big bad government forced the poor, helpless global corporations to censor everyone. The global corporations, they were just trying to do business, like regular corporations. And then the big bad government came and threatened them and forced them to censor everyone. And now we've exposed the big bad government and all of the big bad government actors, we've exposed them. and so we see. And so the corporations now, now they can just go back to, doing business and being free because they never wanted to censor anyone, which of course is all a bunch of bullshit. The way the system works, the governments and corporations are collaborating with each other. It's not the governments forcing global corporations to censor people. It's governments working hand in glove with global corporations to censor in the old days and now to visibility filter us.
In your article, The Musk Town Massacre, you write, and I quote, "Meanwhile, Twitter censorship continues, but who cares? It's not anyone actually gives a flying fuck about free speech. It's the cult versus cult competition, that's the thing. And the Musk cult is kicking COVIDian cult ass." I like this a lot. So is one cult, the COVID cult, just replaced by another cult? And does it always need a cult to continue?
What we are bombarded with day after day is this cartoon version of events, is this fairy tale version of events. This narrative, this cartoonish, childish narrative, is believed by millions and millions of people. I interact with a lot of Americans because I'm in America. And it's astounding how many people actually believe that, that X is now free and there's no censorship or visibility filtering going on, and that everything that happened during the COVID era and all the censorship and everything, all of that came from the Biden administration. And people's ignorance of how the entire global system, both governments and global corporations, operates is just staggering to me. Every once in a while, I will put out another tweet and I tell people, ask Elon about how X collaborates with the German censorship network, which is the Cyberabwehrzentrum, Cyber AZ. Ask him about that because they're continuing to collaborate.
Of course.
With these networks. But people's brains melt down and they shut off, just like they did in the COVID era about the COVID issues. It's like, well, what are you talking about cyber as well? It was all the Biden administration. I don't know if it's that people need a cult, but people, I think a lot of people desperately want hope.
Yeah.
They want, and I don't blame them for this. People want to have some hope. They want a hero. They don't want everyone to be bad guys. They want there to be a good guy. They want, Elon Musk to put on his, Captain Free Speech America suit and come riding in. I'm talking about actual memes on, him in the suit. They want heroes to come in and do battle and save them from the bad guys. And I don't blame them for this. This is a completely human desire. And I'm sorry that the world doesn't work that way, but it doesn't.
And closely connected to the Musk free speech psyop is also, of course, the Trump and MAGA psyop. And you wrote about both psyops and how they are intertwined. And why is the actual Trump administration not a revolution for you? Many commentators on X are cheering right now. We had the Vance speech that enchanted the critical community here in Germany. And to be honest, I do not find many critical points in this particular speech. It was indeed a good speech. And also Trump inaugurated arguably many good people like Jay Bhattacharya as the NIH director or Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as the head of the HHS. There's also the big dismantling of US aid. We got the Doge subcommittee under the guidance of Saint Elon. So isn't everything going great?
Yeah, everything's going wonderful. We're all free. And America is great again. Vance just made his speech. And as you pointed out, nothing horrible about the speech. He said a lot of good stuff in the speech. Elon Musk says a lot of good stuff. Some of what Donald Trump says is good stuff. Again, it's not about what people say. I'm smiling, I think, because it's frustrating to me that I have to make the point to a lot of readers and people on social media that politicians don't always mean what they say. Right? It's so frustrating that I have to make this point in 2025. Politicians sometimes make speeches, for tactical reasons. Yeah, you've got Vance who comes into Europe and, again, blaming the Europeans, right? It's you Europeans. You Europeans are the problem, right? You guys are the ones that want to censor everybody with the DSA and you want to attack free speech, right? It's not the global corporations. It's not the entire global capitalist system that is cracking down on dissent, right? It's just you bad Europeans, just like it was the bad Biden guys, the bad, big, bad government Biden guys. What I'm seeing I over and over again is as the system transitions through this phase, what it's doing is it's pointing at people, it's telling people, look, those are the bad guys. Those are the ones over there. All right. Not us and not the system. We're the freedom people, but it's those bad guys over there. And everyone, of course, are like, censorship, bad. They're the bad ones over there. If someone's pointing at the bad guy, they must be the good guy. All right. So I'll believe every word they say without checking into anything to see, who is Vance connected to? He's connected to the whole Peter Thiel bunch and the transhumanist Silicon Valley technocrats and all of this. It's a long way of saying, who cares what Vance said? Look at what is being done. Look at the character of the new regime that he is part of. I'll tell you a little bit about the character of that regime. For one thing, one of the first things that happened is PBS, the public broadcasting system in the United States, which went totally woke and which, most people hate. Oh, PBS, they're horrible, right? They're the woke censors. They're the woke, libtards and what have you. So PBS, they described Elon's, I almost did it with my hand. I can't do it. I'm in Germany. They almost described Elon's gesture as a Hitler salute, which it was. And because they described it that way, they are now being hauled before a congressional subcommittee. The head of PBS has to go before a congressional subcommittee because the Trump administration and Elon Musk and Vance and the ADL have all decided that reality is it wasn't a Hitler salute. This is the official reality. And PBS didn't conform to the official version of reality. And so that now they have to be hauled before a congressional subcommittee and answer for their refusal to conform to official reality. I mean, it really doesn't get much more Orwellian than that. Another example is, the Gulf of America, right?
It used to be Gulf of Mexico.
And yes, and I laughed at this, of course, because, I'm old enough. I remembered freedom fries. Do you remember freedom fries?
No.
This is during the War on Terror. All right. In the beginning, when the U.S. was getting ready to invade Iraq, the French were like, we don't want to invade Iraq. So the French were not, with the program. Right. And so the French immediately became demonized. And the U.S. government was like, the French are traitors. They're terrorist sympathizers. No, we're not going to eat French fries anymore. From now on, they will be called freedom fries. And I'm serious. There was a whole campaign about this. And people were like, eat freedom fries. It was insane. Anyway, so as soon as the Gulf of America thing started, I thought it was hilarious. But the Associated Press apparently refuses to refer to the Gulf of Mexico as the Gulf of America. And so the Trump administration and Vance, who we were talking about originally, The Trump administration has now banned the Associated Press from all White House events, press events, banned them from flying on Air Force One, and has basically unpersoned the Associated Press in a very public way, which is meant to communicate to people, if we say it's the Gulf of America, you will say it's the Gulf of America, or we will ban you. We will punish you. This is the message that is being put out by this administration, whose vice president just came to Europe and said a bunch of good things.
But he also says 2 + 2 = 5, obviously.
Exactly. And my point is, can we stop celebrating things that people say and start looking at what people do?
In one of your latest columns, Heil to the Chief, you coined the funny term Sieg heiling autism, and you commented, I didn't catch the whole Robert F. Kennedy Jr. hearing yesterday. Did anyone ask Bobby for his thoughts on how to address the rising rates of Sieg heiling autism among the MAGA demographic? End of quote. So how would you interpret that gesture? Was it a power demonstration, like I'm so powerful I can even Sieg Heil right into your faces and there's nothing you can do about it?
I think that's exactly what it was. That's exactly how I interpret it. I don't, Elon Musk is not a neo-Nazi. Elon Musk is a global capitalist. I think it was exactly a, fuck you. I'm going to Heil Hitler right in front of you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And not only is there nothing you can do about it, but it's going to provoke all of the, woke left into a massive freak out, which then I'm going to exploit for my public relations purposes. I mean, I wonder if people remember back to the early Trump years, there was a whole section of the alt-right that did nothing but create controversial memes in order to provoke the hysterical, liberals on the left into freaking out. It was a whole movement for a while. I absolutely interpret his gesture that way. What's astounding to me is, and I wrote a satirical piece about it, as you mentioned. What's astounding to me is just the fanatical reaction of Musk cultists, is what I call them now, writing in. I mean, I was just flooded with furious replies and reactions to people saying, "You're out of your mind, CJ. How could you possibly interpret it that way? He was simply expressing his love, and there was nothing about that." People were just beside themselves with rage that I would even suggest that it was a Hitler salute. It's bizarre.
And that blends perfectly in something else you described in your article, A Tale of Two Psyops, which means the Trump and the Musk psyop. I found a very interesting quote. One of the most effective ways to neutralize an opponent is to let them win. Would you say the Trump and Musk double psyop serves exactly that purpose, to let them win a small territory, respectively X or the United States, and then also justify a repressive backlash by the system, which is much larger, but which the general public doesn't perceive?
The way the cycle works is Globocap wipes out values, decodes values to the point where it generates an intense reaction from one group or the other. Well, when it generated an intense reaction from Islamic fundamentalists, wonderful, because now we've got terrorists. And terrorists are horrible, terrible. And so we have a bad guy that we can fight and that everybody can hate. Switch it to right populism, right? Right populists, during the first Trump years, it didn't really work, because Trump never really turned into Hitler, and he wasn't a Russian agent, and it didn't really work. What the system needs is it needs right populists to become this fascistic Hitlerian force in the same way that Islamic fundamentalists became this terroristic force. Unfortunately, I think we're now entering a stage where the right populist forces are more and more becoming the very bad guy that the system needs them to become to continue its evolution. If you take a look at the For You feed of X, and this is the feed that is curated by X, where they amplify what they want, they de-amplify what they don't want. If you look at this, there's a lot of this stuff is, really no different than Der Stürmer, from the Nazi times. There's just, flagrant anti-Semitism and bigotry, and it's being amplified. Do I think that is being done by conspirators who are manipulating things? No, I do not. I think it is happening organically as this reactionary force becomes more furious and perceives itself to be becoming more powerful. It is becoming more arrogant and more reckless, kind of like what we were talking about with Musk and his Hitler salute. It's getting to the point where it's, we won, we can say whatever we want, we can call people whatever we want, we can be as openly bigoted as we want, which of course the system loves. So it's like, oh, thank you. You're finally becoming this Hitlerian monster that we have been telling people you are for 4 or 5 years. Wonderful. Now we can crack down on you. Not now, it's still the Trump honeymoon period, but in a few years, now we can crack down on you. And you gave us the tools to do it. Just like when Islamic militants carry out a terrorist act and kill a bunch of civilians. The system's, thank you, you killed a bunch of civilians, wonderful. Now we have carte blanche to crack down on you and to do whatever we want.
You also compared the actual Trump-Musk Hopium campaign to the Obama Change campaign, which I found interesting. And we all know after the Obama Change campaign, he started several wars. And do you think this governance practice of creating endless hopium cycles is the natural way that late-stage capitalism evolves?
Sure. It's the way of keeping us engaged in the movie. It's amazing to me that anyone who lived through, the Obama period, the Hope and Change period, I mean, they gave the man a Nobel Peace Prize. And, he just bombed the shit out of, 8 Middle Eastern countries and assassinated American citizens. When the second phase of the whole Trump phenomenon started, and the stuff that I see on social media and replies that I get now, it just blows my mind. It's like, did you not live through the Obama period? When they sold you, they sold the other team, Hope and Change. Hope and change. There was no hope and change, right? This is what I've described in several of my essays as the simulation of democracy. And the simulation of democracy has to continue to a certain degree. They cannot dissolve the simulation of democracy completely because capitalism depends on this. Global capitalism cannot afford to go totalitarian in the sense of 20th century totalitarianism. It can't do it. The point is to keep people engaged here in this good guy, bad guy battle, right? So that they don't start looking over here. Keep people focused on Elon Musk and his Captain America suit so they don't look at X Holdings Corp and all of the global capitalist, transhumanist, corporations and insurance companies and wealth funds and Saudi royals who are actually the owners and operators of X.
What's your opinion on US aid?
I'm stunned, and I've snapped at some of my commenters who have gone nuts about the US aid stuff. I mean, most people who have paid attention to politics have understood for years that, NGOs like, USAID and the National Endowment for Democracy are, CIA cutouts. The way CIA cutouts work is you set up an agency like USAID, which actually does a lot of good work, right? They're actually funding a lot of aid programs and a lot of education programs and things that are badly needed that help a lot of people. And it's also a CIA cutout that is operating to foment regime change and destabilize other governments and so on and so forth. It's not either or, it's both. That's the way these things work. You could pick any of these CIA cutouts, turn them into the bad guy, take them down and do your little PR dance with them, which is exactly what's being done. But what? Do people actually think that the intelligence community is going to stop using NGOs to conduct its affairs all throughout the world? It's showbiz.
It seems quite an analogy to the Twitter files, which was a limited hangout showing we're draining the swamp, but the censorship is more refined in the end, but it continues.
Exactly.
One question about capitalism and fascism. In your book, you distinguish capitalism from fascism as an enemy it fought successfully in the 20th century. Do you think they're really antagonists? Or isn't fascism a natural evolution of capitalism in its late stage?
When I describe the evolution of capitalism in the 20th century and fascism being a reactionary force that was trying to stop it, or communism being a reactionary force that was trying to stop it, what I'm talking about is not whether Nazi Germany or Mussolini's Italy had relationships with corporations and how they functioned in terms of, the market and what have you. What I'm talking about is ideology, the establishment of values, value systems in the same way if you look at Islamic fundamentalism. Right? If someone is in Saudi Arabia, they cut people's heads off for blasphemy. Right? So you can say words, and those words are so offensive in this value system that you get executed for it. In Nazi Germany, it meant something if a Nazi officer accused another Nazi officer of hiding Jews. That meant something because of the value system of Nazi Germany. Capitalism doesn't have that. It matters that the game continues, but it doesn't really matter who's on top at any given time in the game. No.
I wanted to ask you your personal view on the Israel-Palestine question. And I think this emotionalizes a lot of people, me included. Basically, you can also only say wrong things about it, because when you take a humanitarian stance, you're already wrong because you piss off one side.
Sure. And this will generate a lot of hate mail for you. So that's nice. I published a couple of pieces right at the beginning, right after the October 7th attacks, which were, of course, wildly misinterpreted, and then I was attacked by both sides. I've been accused of being a fanatical Zionist and a fanatical anti-Zionist. I had an analysis, but it became pretty clear to me that it was not welcome anywhere, and so I stopped talking about it. I'll say a few things about it. My sympathies are with the Palestinian people and have been with the Palestinian people. My sympathies are never with nation states. At the same time, I don't see Israel as some sort of aberration in the history of nation states. I'm an American. I come from the United States of America. We mass murdered millions of people. We wiped out, an entire people from a continent. This is what empires and nation states do. They set up camp somewhere, and if there are people living in that territory, they kill those people or they drive those people out. And that's what Israel is doing. I wrote this in a piece in the beginning, and what I said is, hey, if you're an Israel supporter and you support that, yeah, go for it. Support that. I don't support mass murder. I don't support that type of oppression. At the same time, I wrote, okay, if you're a pro-Palestinian person and an anti-Zionist and what have you, and you want me to support Hamas going in and mass murdering a bunch of Israelis, no, I'm not going to. I don't support that mass murder either. I think what was most unwelcome about my view is my criticism of Hamas's tactics. Maybe 2008, the Palestinians in Gaza, they organized an action, and it was basically people were marching up to the fences, no violence, just marching up to the walls. And the Israelis shot them, shot them in the head, shot them in the knees, and shot them all. And it was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. And it was a demonstration of classic nonviolent civil disobedience tactics. And I believe that those are the only tactics that are available to the Palestinians at this time. I think that raiding, cross-border raids and mass murdering a bunch of people and taking hostages, this is a stupid tactic. And it's a tactic that gets your entire, territory blown to bits and tens of thousands of people killed. Now, when I say that, my old anti-Zionist friends will now scream at me and say, "You're blaming everything on Hamas, and you're blaming everything on the Palestinians, and you're apologizing for Israel." No, I am not. Israel is a brutal nation state, which we all knew before October 7th. My point is, what the fuck did you expect Israel to do after you conducted this raid and mass murdered a bunch of people? Mass murder is probably not a good tactic. Probably the only tactic that you have available is the Great March type tactic. And it sucks. It means you walk up to the line and you let the Israelis kill you and shoot you and blow your knees off. It sucks. But it's the only tactic that is available. It became very, very clear to me that there was absolutely no space for discussions like this. And there still isn't, as far as I can tell. People are either fanatically, Zionist or fanatically anti-Zionist. And there is no space that I can see for any type of nuanced discussion.
What strikes me is that all of these conflicts are always used to destabilize our societies even further by breaking them into smaller and smaller pieces. What do you think each person can do to stay mentally sane in this cognitive warfare?
I'm really bad at giving. I don't like to give advice. I'll tell you. Maybe I'll just tell you how I manage it for myself. First of all, I have this crazy faith in life, in humanity, and in life, in people. I don't think, I said it in court, you were in court when I said it, I don't think totalitarianism wins. I think there are periods in history when the really ugly forces, the really ugly part of us, humans, become dominant. And these periods in history are not fun, and they suck. A lot of people write to me and they ask me, well, what do we do? How do we solve this? How do we fix this? I try to write back to them. It's just like, I don't have a fix for you. I don't have a solution for you. I can play my small part in this huge complex drama that's taking place in the world. I'm a writer, I'm an author, I'm a satirist and a provocative asshole. And that's my role. I can do my part. I can't fix everybody's problems. I can't stop all of the horrors in the world. I can't save the Palestinians. I can't stop the next war that, NATO foments somewhere. I can't do all of this. I can play my part. I can do what is given to me to do, and then feel like, okay, I've done my part. It's about doing what I have in my power to do to the best of my ability. When I got charged by the German authorities and they started prosecuting me, I could have paid the fine in the beginning. I could have paid the 3,600 euro and it would be over. And I would, be a hate criminal. I'm not technically a hate criminal now. I could have paid it and made it go away. The reason I chose not to is because I think to fight this publicly and to shine a light on this, and to bring attention to this, I feel like, okay, that is in my power to do. Do I have the power to stop the German authorities from persecuting everybody? No, I don't, right? And I might lose. The Constitutional Court might, reject my case. They might not even hear. I don't know. It's about doing what you have the power to do in the place that you are, trusting that you're in the right place, surrounded by the right people, doing what you have in front of you to do, and then letting go.
I'm glad that you were shining a light on this problematic because it affects many people in Germany. And what I was asking myself is, after these harsh experiences in Germany, I mean, you came here, you told me once, because you thought this is the least country that will turn into some fascist state again. But after you have experienced all that stuff in Germany, what makes you stay in Germany after all?
Really, it's a couple of things, really. And, honestly, most of it is my wife. She's an American also. I got her to come here to Berlin from New York. I came first and I was here for a while. And she started a business. She's got a business. She's a yoga teacher and she's got a whole business and she's got clients and a student base. And she's also a very social person. So she has a whole network of friends. I'm like a hermit. I sit in my office and write. I had some good German friends, but they dropped me in 2020. So my wife is invested in her business and her friends, and she doesn't want to pick up and run away to yet another foreign country. And the other thing is, I'm getting older and I am dug in here. I mean, I'm in the pension system, I'm in the healthcare system, and I'm not rich. It's funny, people, they've stopped recently, but they wrote me a lot for a while saying, why don't you get the hell out of Germany? Why don't you leave Germany? And after a while, I started writing them, why don't you send me $500,000? I'm not rich. I can't just pick up and move my life on a whim to some other country. I have been struggling, or I'll be honest, I'll be a little confessional in this interview. I have been struggling for a while to try to, fall in love with Berlin again. No, but to forgive, maybe to forgive and settle in, because it doesn't look like I'm going anywhere anytime real soon. And so I have been working emotionally to try to reintegrate so that I'm not furious every time I walk down the street. It got really bad for a while.
I can totally resonate to that because I had the same, and I'm a Berliner. I'm born and raised here. I had the same process of dissociation, and it's very slowly healing. CJ, thank you so much. I'm also glad that your wife is so bonded here, so that we have you here for more years to come. I really appreciated the conversation with you. Thank you.
Me too. Thanks for asking me.